You say we're episode 9.
We are
Wow,
episode 9. Yeah.
that's crazy. So I thought today the topic of discussion is when it all goes wrong.
Hmm.
Because it often does. So the scenarios I'm thinking about are you get a component or you're searching for a library, and how long do you persist trying to push through it? How long do you persist on a certain design when you realize this isn't going to work? Or is it just, you know, the thing I will struggle in these scenarios is, am I doing it wrong?
Yeah.
Or can it not do what I want it to do?
Right.
Or, is there some other blocker that's going to, is this just like a bad idea? Can you foresee that this isn't a good solution down the road?
Yeah, exactly. It's like those libraries that do 90% of what you're looking for, and then you're just like, how do I twist it to just do, or and the opportunity, the win of not having to rewrite all that 90% is always the the
Yeah.
temptation.
I also think about it. I mean, in the current work I'm busy doing, I went down the Mongo DB route because that's kind of what I had on hand, and that's what all the code supported. And it
Right.
was like late into it that I realized Mongo absolutely sucks at deleting large volumes of data.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
at that point, there was just, I didn't have a better solution, and there was just no way to back out of it. And we had
Yeah.
to go with it.
Yep.
Thankfully now I have, and the Postgres is so different. A million records, deleting a million records in 2 seconds. Mongo was like
Wow.
10 minutes. So
Yes.
yeah, big difference. And
Yeah.
also, I mean, we see now with the scanner library that we're trying to put in, he got it working to a point and then realized it just didn't support modern browsers, or, so I think that there's a lot of it is like, when is this design wrong, bad, or when is it not going to scale? Or, how do
Yep.
I pick a library or component or whatever that I know is going to get me in the long run? So I think those are the type of things.
Yep.
For me, libraries, especially on NPM, I always look at, or on GitHub, when was the last time this thing was updated?
Yep.
That to me is, I absolutely always look at that as like, is this thing being actively maintained, or is the entire code base 5 years old, completely stale, and not going to touch it?
Especially in the JavaScript node world. I mean, that makes it a dinosaur. You won't get it running. And yeah, I mean, I also go one level deeper, depending on how I'm going to rely on it, is to sort of see a little bit about who is developing it, right? But not on everything. You're right. It really depends on how much it's going to feature in the solution.
I mean, I have taken a number of libraries and gone. I mean, I remember one that Google Passport library.
Yes.
It did 95%, and there was just one callback that didn't give me what I wanted. And at that point, I just thought, stuff it. I forked it. I added what I wanted, and we were good to go.
Right.
But I mean, that does, if Google changes the way they work, but that would just stuff the entire world.
Sure.
If there ever was an update, we would have to update our library in conjunction if they haven't accommodated the thing that we needed.
Right. Yeah. Yep. I see what you mean. If they haven't added it or deprecated the way we're working around it.
Yeah. So that is one thing. And we've done that a number of times. We did that with the NetSuite connector as well. We forked off and, recreated it as to meet our needs. I did that I remember there was a stage I was trying to work out how to maintain a pool of worker threads in Node.
Oh, yes.
And I went through it.
Manage them at a top level. Yeah.
And also to say, well, I only want 10 threads to be concurrent. I don't want to let it just run, it must park the other threads. And
Like
and
a
I went
controller.
through, yeah, and I went through a number of libraries. In the end, I took like 3 libraries and I went, I like that from that library, I like that from that library, and I like that from that library. And I put them all together and I wrote my own.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one that's busy. It's cranking in, in Israel, it's cranking in Pi, it's cranking all over the show, and it hasn't given me any hassle since I did that. I think I used it in Data Tamer as well. Yeah. So whenever I'm doing threads, that sucker goes in, boom, you're good to go.
And
but
then
I think
on the other side of it, we're talking about when it goes wrong. So that was a situation where you picked 3 and put them together. But what do you think is the longest you've gone before you hit the threshold of, oh, I should have already backed out of this?
the Mongo was definitely, I should have backed out of that one.
On this particular project, sure. Okay.
Yeah, as soon as I realized it, but I think we had a time deadline. But I think I wasted more time trying to improve the performance on Mongo than it would have taken to bail and put in SQL. I just didn't have the experience that I have now with Postgres.
Sure, makes sense.
And so it wasn't really an option at that point. But now, I've got more Postgres experience, and I would have just bailed on that and just gone, nope. We spent a lot of time trying to work our way around that problem instead of realizing that was just a bad move. So that's one.
I passed on it at one job. I passed on that threshold to somebody else, and it just kept moving the goalposts. It's like I should have probably backed out of something, but they inherited it and moved on. So that happens more often. As you said, the killer of it, it's time and budget. It's like often, we don't live in a perfect world, and so we have to be able to catch these thresholds, as you're going to talk about, quickly. Because at a certain point, if you don't catch it, it's like, oh, I don't really want to put that janky code out there.
Yeah. And that's why I love small R&D projects. I love, saying, okay, well, Mongo sucked at delete. Well, let me put, 1 million records into a Postgres database and run a delete script. And how long does that take? And will it? And I did that before I committed to it. I did that, and I made damn sure that, that worked. And I think that's what I've learned to do, is to do these small little R&Ds to say, does that actually, will it support our need? Will that library, will that code, will that way of thinking actually support our need? Or is it just like, this isn't going to work?
Yeah, it comes back to a theme that I think we've discussed before, where it's like we want to get into the coding part of it. That's, because that sort of get in a zone and start creating. But there's a bit of rigor that has to go into beforehand so that you don't short circuit yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we did a session on a prototype that you showed when you were doing the querying and stuff like that. And as you say, that stopped you in your tracks on a path that you said, okay, I'm not going to go another 3 weeks down this path. Yeah.
I mean, that same was true with, I have been times when you think you're busted on a Friday, and that's just because you're tired.
Sure. Oh yeah.
And you come back on Monday and you're like, oh yeah, there was the problem.
Yeah,
so there are those times, and when that happens, like today I was hitting something. When that happens, I tend to scale down what I'm trying to do. And so if I'm in like a larger project and I'm trying to do something and it's just not working, I think to myself, okay, how can I isolate this code? How can I isolate this process so that I can check that it is actually, what I think it is, and that's causing the problem. And I think that's really important, is to say, well,
decomposing it,
yeah, in my mind, I'm blaming, the certain technology, but let me pull it out. Let me isolate that technology from the bigger area of the app, and let me prove to myself that that technology or that code is actually what's causing the problem. Again, if you go back to my favorite Mythbusters, they do that often. They will, run a gambit of 4 or 5 options and say, which of these, whatever they're doing, is the most optimal, which one does it work, which one doesn't it work, and try and just isolate that, isolate that library. Make a simple scanner app, does it work, in all the browsers on the phone? Does it, is it doing what we're wanting to do? Like, get that nailed up front. And I think that saves so much pain, because often you're wasting time, because in a bigger app, it takes you 2 or 3 minutes to get to running a test on a code.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can pull that out, either, with Python or with something else, a couple of scripts, a couple of API calls, take a little bit of time, bam, you've isolated your code, you're good to go. You realize, nope, that's not the problem.
And how much of this methodology do you think came from your engineering, or like sort of getting in the electrical, mechanical processes early on? Because to me, this seems like the engineering part that often gets missed in a junior developer, that.
Yeah, I think it came more from, through my career, I've built a lot of weird apps. I built an app that managed a whole VMware backend. I built and did all sorts of things. We built, so I've learned to. I built apps that manage, SQL Server integration services. And that's kind of where I've been. So I'm very rarely have I been, data in, data out kind of base. And I've kind of just realized, if you don't R&D each kind of little phase, you just get burnt. And I think that's where it's come from. But also it is, in my woodworking and other areas, I'm like, they talk a lot about building models.
Right.
They'll build a small scale model. They'll sometimes, even using cheap wood, they'll build a full scale model, and they'll put that model in the house, and then they'll leave it there for a month, whether they like it or don't like it.
Right.
And then they can chop it, and sometimes they even build it out of cardboard, because it just gives them their visual, and then they can mark it and play with it as they walk past it. So the evolution of design is not, I have an idea, I instantly build it. And I think we need to, in software, especially now that in a sense, the coding is going away. I mean, this is now the same thing is happening in woodwork. We getting slightly tracked, but now with CNC and 3D printing and all of that, it's like the concept, the design of what I want to build, the concept of what we want to produce or what the app does is more important than how it does it, or more important. We can get the AI to generate the component for us. So, but it's like, how does that component fit into the bigger world? And if you're doing that, how robust is that thing that's given it? And, how is your framework going to manage that thing?
Yes.
That component that you're getting from AI. Because, I mean, let's face it, getting a component of AI is in some ways no different than buying a suite of components from, Telerik or one of these other people.
Yep.
You're taking the component, you're putting it in. It's like, well, then what? How are you using it? What are you doing with it? How are you going to maintain it, and all of this, and those things come with it. But it's like, whether I type, if I want a function, whether I spend an hour or 2 hours writing it by myself, or I go and get that function from AI, really makes no difference in to the world. Other than AI is going to get it right first time, and I'm not.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. On this topic, I read that that there, back in the time when people mechanically type before word processors, there was a typist as a role, and then there was an editor. They separated the two, but now they've fused, because the word processor is taking on more and more. Up to 90% of the job then shifts. If it gets automated, the job grows in responsibility often to include new tasks. It absorbs more tasks. And I think the same thing is what you're saying with coding. It's like if we have the ability to generate code quickly, it doesn't actually take away that. Now it's going to actually mean that the expectation is we've spent even more time making sure it's scalable, optimized for the users. All of the performance things that might have been pushed off if you just spend 10 hours coding.
Yeah. So getting back to the original discussion, the thing is, like, let's say we've got this library now. Cadence wrapping the code to get barcode, get the code from the item from a database.
Yes.
Now he did it all client side, which is a classic mistake.
Yes, the database and everything, or you mean?
Just the call to the API.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Okay, so now let's say we lose support for that API. So I think what I'm saying is, a lot of this type of stuff, we can build frameworks that are intelligent are flexible enough to change out components in case you lose support for them.
Yes.
So if what I said to him, we now need to move that call to the back end, then we wrap it. Now, we can have multiple APIs.
Yep.
If we hit API 1 and it doesn't work, we can go to API 2. Let's say that we get a paid one. So API is an open source one. If we don't find it, then we can go to a paid one. Yep. And if somehow that API no longer exists, we can swap it out and put another one. And all the time, the client doesn't know.
Yeah.
And I was taught early on, I learned, between anything that's outside of your full control, kind of isolate. Always put a layer in there. Always put a way that you can swap that sucker out. I mean, even with this database swapper, out. I had a provider that did all the Mongo calls. And basically, I pulled that guy out and I put a Postgres one in. And more or less worked.
Yeah. That's the provider pattern. That's beautiful. Yes. Yeah.
And I think, isolating to say, well, if we're going to do this, if we're going to use this component or use it that way, how do I isolate it that I can get back in there, that I can swap it out, that I can extend it, and that component doesn't take it down?
Yeah. And I like, I was just going to say, in the integration platform that we work on together, I like the way that you also took that to, you might have a node that does something, but the core of the node might be interacting with a specific system. If you put all of that system's code into a package that you can bring into the node, then you can version it like that without touching your node. You can actually say, oh, the system has upgraded or changed their API, but now you're taking your NPM package, which is a smaller code base, easier to test. And once that's done, it rolls up into the system. So I've just seen it in practice, how it allows there's like dozens of NPM packages now going on in that platform.
Yeah. There are. And if we ever needed to, we could use those NPMs in isolation in another project.
Yeah.
But it's again, you've got a library, you're saying, I'm going to put my own interface between these two things. It reminds me of my old boss. They built this entire platform and they got this library. It was the best library. And it came out that it was a Russian library. And they're an American company. I think in the end, they had to ditch it.
Yes. Yeah.
So you can, as a developer, you can go in, you can pick the best library, you can have the best performance, and then boom, some political interaction happens and they're like, sorry, you can't use that one. But
or the other way around. Sorry, you have to use this one for political reasons. This one is, by the company that we want to support or what have you.
Yeah. Or, our sister company actually, has a technology to do that and we kind of required to use it.
Because it's going to cost us nothing. So you got to go with it. Yeah.
And I think that's, again, I mean, I don't know how much it costs for them to pull that out, but if that technology had been isolated and, proxied in, that's the term, a proxy.
Yes, yes.
And proxied in, then it should be fairly easy to, swap that technology out.
Yep.
So, I mean, that is one side of it, is really protecting your code base from these things that can change, and you just have to make sure you're not impacted by them.
Yeah, it's almost, in my mind, it's a little bit more high level, but it's a sort of like a pull request. You're bringing in somebody else's code into your code base, and that you need to do a certain amount of rigor to make sure that what is it going to impact, and then as you say, is it going to cause more hassles than not? And that's the thing for me. Often, my threshold is if I start searching for an issue and I see nobody else has searched for this issue, and I start to really get concerned, like, okay, maybe I'm really down a weird cul-de-sac here, and.
Yeah. But that's the other side of it, is like, okay, am I just using this library wrong? Everybody else says it to work, and I just cannot get it to work.
Right.
Like, and that's when I really go down to, okay, let me, like, today I was, things weren't working. I went down. I'm going to generate, instead of, I'm going to generate like 5 records, run a really small thing, and really, so I can analyze every single step that it's doing. So that's what I tend to do. That's when I break out and I say, right, let me prove that I'm not missing something here, that I am, go back, not back to the drawing board, but go back absolute basics, what code's coming in, what's the values, what's the process, and then, like, boom, nope. And that just, I think that just saves one a whole lot of, but when you're in the crisis and it's not working, and it's like, you're like, it's at that point you think, okay, one more change, and then one more change, and then you've got 3 hours have gone, and you've got absolutely nowhere. One of the things that we learned, my first product, STT, was a disaster. We spent too many hours late at night coding. And in the end, we pushed it out, and in the end, every single bit of code that we developed late after hours, we replaced. Every single piece of code we developed after hours, we replaced.
Yeah, it's added, and it's funny that we didn't have the time and money to do it right, but we had the time and money to do it twice.
Yes. So that's why I'm like, just stuff that I don't do late night coding. But what we found is, don't add and refactor at the same time.
Yes. Yeah,
so
that makes sense.
If you go into your code base and you realize, okay, I need to change this to accommodate something new, change it. Get it ready to accommodate something new. Make sure it works the way it did. Then add and then refactor. Because if you refactor and add at the same time, when it doesn't work, you haven't a clue whether it's the new code or whether it's your refactor. So we had this thing, if you decide that the code's a mess and you need to put in some, a pattern, or, abstract it out into various classes so that you can accommodate this new thing, go ahead, do all of that. Let's say the code's a big monoblock and you want to break it up because now you need to add some extra functionality, and break it up, get it all working. You're happy, test it. Then you know that you're on solid ground. Then add.
Right.
Because otherwise, man, what you'll end up doing is going back to the original, getting rid of your new thing, refactoring, because you just have no idea, is it the new thing or is it the old? Is it the old?
That's right. And especially in, if it's a major refactor of anything, of, any substance,
Yeah.
so many little tiny things that can get missed. It can be a messy bit.
I mean, I've moved from Mongo to Postgres and I'm almost right through it. And then there are a whole bunch of new reports.
Mhm.
I am not touching the reports until I get this thing from Mongo to Postgres completely stable, completely back where it was.
Yes. Yeah.
Then once I'm happy with that, then I'll go into the new reports. I ain't touching anything new until this is done. It's like, yeah, I'm not that stupid. That's just a recipe for complete and utter disaster.
So my breakout command is git stash. If I run git stash, then that means I've given up. I've thrown in the towel.
Yeah.
Get back to where I was and let's start it again.
And and that can be true on a whole application level, like what we're doing, like what I'm doing, or just in a specific form. And if you want to,
a day's worth of work.
Yeah, or even an hour's worth of work is go in, refactor, prepare it for the change, then go put in the change, and then you're good to go.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, I was just going to say some of the things that we have talked about in the past, just about how AI is changing. Is there anything that you've come across that is something you wanted to share?
Well, just the last on the previous topic. Sometimes when you just hit a dead end, just getting away from your computer for an hour, going for a walk, cup of tea, change of scenery, or just like getting on with a completely different task.
Yes.
And then you'll often come back and you'll go, oh, there's the mistake. It was a spelling mistake. And I didn't see it. Or, it's like, oh, yes, duh, I missed that. Or, just do that. Just get away from your computer,
Yeah.
Just call quits.
That's why the piano is there, because I actually, it really helps. Just the 2 or 3 lines, a minute or two, it puts me in such a mindset. And I found a bug yesterday from that with the PNG file. The reason it wasn't showing was because the file name had PNG in capitals.
Oh, nice. Well, that's what you get for having a Mac.
True.
But yeah, I'll often take the dog for a walk. I mean, I've got space. I can go wherever.
Yeah,
and
that's great.
And do that. And previously I used to, if I can go for a ride, but just get out, just get your mind off it, pick another task, do some admin, do something else. And it's amazing. Often I'll go for a walk and without even thinking about the problem, by the time I get back, it's like, yeah, that's where I screwed up. That's where the problem is. And boom, you're good to go again. So I think all of those things are important. AI. What happens when AI goes wrong? You had it, AI go wrong.
Yeah, we can do a whole a session on that. I had it go wrong in a very subtle way, but it wrote a class I thought was being implemented as a singleton, and it was weeks into the testing before I realized it wasn't. But no, I was actually going to say that there's a new desktop version of ChatGPT that now can, instead of having to paste code into it, it links up with other things. So I just started testing it, but like you can link it to your terminal, for instance. So you're in the middle of the terminal and you get a whole error, and you go to ChatGPT's application and you say, work with terminal. And then when you start chatting, it's aware of what's on your terminal. So it'll start, and it doesn't execute commands, but it'll give you commands to execute. And they also has a VS Code plugin where whatever file is open automatically gets part of the content.
Yeah, I mean, that Codinium does that, and I use that quite a lot. Except it irritates me sometimes because it's got those little things at the top of your function, and sometimes if I'm really fast, I'm like, I click on it, and then the code jumps a line.
Oh, yes. That
where the code was and my mouse is no longer where the function name is. It's not like the header for the thingy for the inline thing for Codinium.
Yes.
I find that highly irritating. But I haven't got to, well, I haven't had the need, but I haven't really got to where you are on doing like full apps. To
Hmm.
me, it's more about, I use AI a lot in terms of, write a small function. It's like
Hmm.
I had my field names coming back in Pascal case. I wanted them in a nice label. So I just
Yes.
like, instead of me writing, I just like, give me a function to do that. It's like, screw
Hmm.
that. I'm now beyond writing that code. It's like,
Yeah,
screw that. That comes from AI now. Um,
sure.
and like, I wanted I had two tables moving records from table A to table B, but I wanted to delete them as I go from table A
Hmm.
in Postgres.
Yes.
It's like, I had no freaking clue how to do that.
Yep.
You know, I got, I did it and I asked that the other one to do it just for curious. But I went with a bit of a hybrid. But again, I don't, if it's a simple function, I'll just copy paste the code. But often I'll be like looking at it, analyzing what it's doing, reading the
Yep.
explanation, and then rewriting some of it myself for my own scenario.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's in my mind, because I know how it works in the background, like, it takes a random seed and that's where it starts its solution from. And what that means, because it's random, is that it will seed sometimes in places where it's not as good as in other places, right? Because of the randomness. So often I'll see halfway through the function, I'll be like, no, this starting point is just weaker than even I would start, right? So I stop it
Yeah.
in either another iteration, but like you said, I guess it's still, when you're working with a junior, you have to take all these things into account too. It's sort of just a different interface.
And also sometimes it comes down to rewording how you ask the prompt.
Right.
It's
That's
like
right.
I said, I want to do transfer, and then it just gave me Postgres. I'm like, no, I need a TypeScript function. I need progress. I need this. I need all of these things. I want to limit to 1,000 records at a time.
Hmm.
Boom.
Yeah, it
And it
likes
pretty
it
much
detail.
got, yeah. But I mean, I took a Mongo pipeline, a complex one, and I threw it in there and said, give me SQL. Bang. First time. Man, that saved me at least 3 days worth of nightmare that I would never have been able to do.
Yep.
And
So
I
I
think
just,
that's the crazy thing is that, like, you've got DB admin expert level assistance right there.
yep.
And you don't have to bug anybody. I
Yeah.
think that's the crazy part. That's what a lot of people don't get with AI is like, if you use it like that, it's like, how do I create an index for this, this scenario that you don't know because it's a new technology? I think you're good to go. And I think getting back to when it goes wrong, yes, the AI can help a lot in terms
Mm.
of, am I doing this right? Where
Hmm.
previously we would have to spend hours reading through the documentation, through help,
Right.
through, 5 different blogs. Now it's like all of that is condensed into the AI.
That's right. Yep.
All that
Yep. No,
information is there and it'll give it to you. Boom.
that's right. Yeah, and like you said at the beginning part, when you're doing that first evaluation of different things, you can also ask it, especially if it's popular libraries, you can
Yeah.
ask it advice around those things. And I found it has helped me identify a couple libraries that I wouldn't have necessarily gone to because they were
Yeah.
strangely named or something. Um,
I asked it to do something and it came back with a library and I'm like, okay. When I was evaluating, the different type orms, or there's another one, Objectinize or something like that for databases, I leaned quite a bit into the AI to give me
yep,
opinions on all of this stuff. And
that's awesome. Well, they say the newest models are going to have PhD level reasoning in several categories. So what I'm excited about is this My Body app is a good example. It's like typically to go further with this, because we are as a team, we know the technical, we can build features, we can build the engineering and the code,
yeah,
but the medical stuff, you almost need an advisor that you have to extract information out of or has to play a very active role. But now you have a medical expert at your disposal who can, get you through that. And then you just need sort of somebody they can bounce it off of, which is a little bit,
yeah,
I think
yeah.
yeah.
we do have a medical expert that we will be working with. But yes, I agree.
Yeah,
but
100%. Yeah, I just mean I mean from the point of view of it's not essential to go. We're not delayed by that person. That's what I mean.
No, and also that we don't have to bug the heck out of them.
Right. Exactly.
But also, building that technology into the app is going to be, I think, really, really helpful, because I have lots of questions.
Mm-hmm.
And every now and again, I go into that, into ChatGPT, and, then you've got to start the chat from, okay, I have this condition and I am this old and I have this, and, whereas if all of that's in the body log, now that then gives you, but, you can give a richer prompt. Yeah. Again, absolutely. We've got to be really careful with that information coming back, and,
But I've been playing around with the exact same concept around learning. I'm working on a little learning tutor app, right? And this similar idea, having a little 10-question profile, taking that profile, storing it for the user, and then every prompt that gets sent, I augment it, around that profile. Yeah. And it's already showing, that, as you say, with the My Body Log, I could see that being a dietitian advisor or even a yeah, all of that. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great to chat about it stuff again.
Yeah. And we'll connect again
for next time.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome. Have a great afternoon. Cheers.
Cheers.